pro et contra.
Hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Just when we thought that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen went to China in order to discuss the country's manufacturing overcapacity, even though nobody really knows what it means as it relates to a foreign sovereign country that doesn't need others to control its production volumes. So just as we thought Yellen was there to protect American workers, as had been previously announced, it turns out that she is in China to deliver a strong political message instead. This is something that a diplomat would typically do, but of course, in our case, rules and logic may not always apply. According to Financial Times, Yellen delivered a strong warning to China's vice minister of, quote, significant consequences if its companies continue to support free trade, continue to exist in the free market, and do business in the interest of their own country by doing business with one of their allies, Russia. In a recent video several days ago, you may remember, I said that we would have to see whether this visit to China is any different from her prior visit back in July of 2023, not even a year ago. And for it to be different, Yellen would have to abandon this carrot and stick approach. Well, it appears that she still has her old agenda, and of course, she hasn't learned any new tricks. Financial Times says, and I quote, "The United States has warned of significant consequences if Chinese companies provide support for Moscow's war against Ukraine in one of the sharpest messages it has yet delivered to Beijing." What does she mean by consequences? Likely they mean more trade barriers and sanctions against Chinese banks and manufacturers. Janet Yellen's warning comes after Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told EU and NATO foreign ministers last week that Beijing was assisting Moscow at a concerning scale and providing tools, inputs, and technical expertise, according to 3 people familiar with the discussions. It's always unidentified sources, people who are familiar but don't want to be disclosed, and we somehow are expected to believe those words. So effectively, the United States is trying to prevent China from doing a very small portion of what the United States is doing to support the proxy war in Ukraine. Of course, China is not sending its instructors and mercenaries to fight in a war like the West, but doing cross-border business in a free market economy should not be allowed anymore unless the United States approves, and this is according to Janet Yellen. Financial Times says that Anthony Blinken delivered a very similar message to NATO earlier this week, indicating that China should be discouraged from trading with Russia if that trade includes any materials that can be used, possibly be used, for its own production and manufacturing. At the same exact time, the same exact week, NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg gave a very interesting, very telling, I would say, interview in which he emphasized that NATO and the United States has not put their own soldiers in danger, but have achieved great results by enabling the Ukrainian soldiers weaken Russia. And here's just one of the clips from that interview. Watch.
Support from NATO allies and support from the United States to Ukraine is something which benefits our own security interests. Because by allocating a fraction of our defense budgets, we have enabled the Ukrainians to destroy significant parts of the Russian combat capability without putting any NATO soldier or any US soldier in harm's way. So this is really something that is in our interest to continue to do. And not only continue to do, but to do more, to step up, and to ensure that we do it in a predictable, robust way for the long haul.
So are these double standards, rules for thee but not for me? Let me know what you think in the comments below. It is worth remembering that both China and Russia multiple times offered to hold peace negotiations, but of course Zelensky, as you already know, he signed a presidential order making it completely illegal to hold any negotiations or even speak about peace talks, which would have saved thousands of lives, of course. And we know that both China and Russia are members of the BRICS bloc, so cross-border trade is effectively something that they agreed to do. So it is unlikely that this carrot and stick approach will yield any results whatsoever. Financial Times here makes a really interesting conclusion. China's trade with Russia has more than doubled since 2020, from $108 billion to $240 billion last year, with business people flocking across the border to explore opportunities following Western sanctions. This, of course, is not a bad thing for both countries because both are sovereign countries, and why wouldn't they explore opportunities that benefit them, especially being neighbors, geographical neighbors? Beijing maintains that it does not provide lethal support to Russia and that it is the West that is adding fuel to the fire of the conflict. But the United States and its allies accuse China of providing tacit support, with Xi and Chinese ministers meeting Russian counterparts scores of times since the full-scale invasion. Okay, so it sounds as though these meetings are making the West uncomfortable, so they're not supposed to meet. I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to read that, how you're supposed to truly feel about that comment. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. But here's the catch. The very last sentence of this article is quite interesting. Chinese academics, meanwhile, are carefully studying Moscow's response to sanctions for hints on how to cope in case Beijing and the West come into conflict over Taiwan. So China is very well aware that the United States does view it as the ultimate adversary, and Russia is only a stepping stone. Professor John Mearsheimer recently said that one of the biggest foreign policy mistakes made by the United States was alienating Russia. It didn't have to be this way, and instead of pushing Russia to develop strong ties with China, the United States should have made friends with Russia in order to counterbalance China from a foreign policy perspective. Of course, we all have to learn to get along to live in a safe world. But that was Mearsheimer's perspective. That is not what the leaders did, however, and now we have Russia and China, in addition to other countries in the region, willing to support each other as they increasingly realize that not only are there military threats, but also economic risks associated with continuing to do business with the West. So very interesting times. I'm curious to see what else Janet Yellen's trip brings, and I will keep you updated as always. Thank you for watching. Thanks for your time. Go ahead and subscribe. Give this video a like and share it if you enjoyed it. Follow me on Rumble and YouTube. I would love to have you back for my next one. And if you enjoy reading, find me on Substack. You will find all of my social links in the video description below. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care.
Thank you for watching, like and subscribe.